Feathers and Ash, Part 4, A Sacrifice Most Deep.
Feathers and ash, two worlds collide, where steam meets sky and truth can't hide if the
25 seconds. The creature's crystalline teeth glowed brighter as it drew more power from the volcanic core. Its body continued hardening, becoming more shark-like, more predatory. Tentacles thick as tree trunks reached for both father and son. 20 seconds. Kai wove through the spitter's barrage, the feathered suit shedding projectiles like rain. But the stones were getting closer, more accurate. Steam began rising from the oiled feathers as he approached the superheated zone around the Ancient One's feeding position. 15 seconds. Marcus crashed through a barrier wall, the sacrificial wraiths buying precious moments with their dissolution. The scavengers swarmed toward the casualties, leaving gaps in the defensive grid. 10 seconds. The Ancient One's compound eyes fixed on Marcus's approach, its tentacles coiled like springs, preparing to crush the tiny figure racing toward its volcanic heart. 5 seconds. Marcus slammed into the Ancient One's flank. Crystalline teeth snapped shut inches from his brass helmet. He drove the shaped charge deep between two hardened ribs, volcanic glass scraping against copper as the creature's body convulsed. The compound eye swiveled, focused. Hundreds of lenses reflected Marcus's terrified face. 3 seconds. Tentacles thick as ship masts coiled around Marcus's torso. Brass buckled, his ribs cracked. Air hissed from ruptured seals. The Ancient One's maw opened, revealing rows of teeth like cathedral spires, each one glowing with thermal energy. Kai crashed through the spitter's line, feathers smoking, skin blistering beneath the oiled leather. He grabbed his father's outstretched hand just as the massive jaws began to close. 1 second. The Ancient One's bell contracted around Marcus instinctively, trapping him within its burning embrace. The creature's own crushing grip activated the mercury switch. Father and creature became one writhing mass of brass, flesh, and volcanic fury for just an instant before. The first explosion tore through the Ancient One from within, but Marcus had positioned them perfectly. The blast drove the creature's massive corpse downward into the thermal chamber where the two lost charges waited. Crack, crack. The first lost charge succumbed to the cascading pressure. Crack, crack, crack. The second detonation followed milliseconds later. 3 explosions in rapid sequence. Kai watched in heartbreak as the Ancient One's death throes consumed his father. The smaller steam wraiths, sensing their leader's destruction, turned on him with desperate fury, their tentacles lashed out. The triple shockwave hit like a sledgehammer. The water around Kai erupted in a massive bubble of superheated steam and debris. The dying steam wraiths were instantly vaporized mid-grasp, their grip torn away by the tremendous force. The thermal chamber walls buckled and collapsed. Steam erupted in towering geysers as the interconnected vent system crushed itself shut. Massive sections of volcanic rock tumbled inward, sealing the spawning chambers with grinding finality. The Ancient One's scream, like the sound of steam escaping from 100 boiler pipes, was cut short as its massive form shattered into countless glowing fragments, taking Marcus with it into the volcanic abyss. Kai felt himself tumbling upward in the churning maelstrom, his grandfather's suit protecting him from the worst of the thermal blast. Fighting through his grief, pure instinct took over as he folded the feathered arms tight against his body, the ancient craftsmanship channeling the water flow to propel him toward the surface above the sealed vents. Kai broke the surface, gasping and choking. Behind him, the seafloor shuddered and groaned. Steam hissed from smaller fissures as the trapped pressure found harmless escape routes, but the main threat was contained forever. The water around him grew calmer, the chaotic thermal currents settling into gentler flows. His father's plan had worked. His chest ached with loss as he watched the last bubbles rise from where Marcus had vanished into the crushing depths. Thomas's weathered hands pulled Kai from the scalding water into his small boat. The old fisherman's face showed a mixture of amazement and worry as he helped the boy strip off his grandfather's feathered suit, the ancient material still steaming from the superheated depths.
Easy there, lad. You're shaking like a leaf in a gale.
He began rowing away from the Prometheus, his stroke steady and sure.
I saw the explosion from up here. Your father, did he?
Kai couldn't speak. Through his tears, he watched the diving crews frantically working their equipment, but he already knew what they would find.
Aye, I thought as much.
The old fisherman rode in silence for a moment, then spoke again.
Your grandfather wore that suit when he saved my own father from a Rith current, 40 years past. Said the birds taught him how water should move around a body.
He glanced at the feathered suit lying in the bottom of the boat.
Never thought I'd see it used again.
He understood. At the end, my father understood. About the birds, about everything.
His voice hoarse from breathing the stale air through the suit's deteriorating apparatus.
Men like your father, they spend their lives fighting the sea, trying to control it with machines and mathematics. But men like your grandfather, they learn to work with it instead.
He shipped his oars as they approached the village pier.
Which kind of man will you be, I wonder?
When the diving crews descended with fresh equipment to retrieve Marcus, they found only his brass helmet lying on the seafloor, polished clean by the superheated currents. The helmet's glass faceplate was intact, but there was no sign of the man who had worn it. 3 days later, they recovered the rest of his diving suit from a deeper crevice in the volcanic rock. The leather and brass seals were intact, the air supply functioning perfectly, but the suit itself told a horrifying story. Wrapped around the torso and limbs were the translucent remains of jellyfish tentacles, ethereal appendages that had somehow maintained their form even in death, as if the Ancient One's final embrace had left permanent marks on the equipment. Marcus had remained with the charges until the end, ensuring the vent was properly sealed even as the creature dragged him into the volcanic depths. On his equipment belt, somehow protected from the pressure and scalding water despite the jellyfish remains clinging to the suit, they discovered 2 gannet feathers, both oiled and waterproofed in the traditional island manner, carefully secured to his apparatus. He had prepared them with meticulous care, but had never found the chance to share what he had learned. Elena later told Kai how his father had come to her the night before the dive, inquiring about the traditional fishing techniques, the way island hunters traditionally oiled bird feathers for underwater work, how the natural oils repelled water more effectively than any manufactured substance.
He was attempting to understand, trying to bridge your world and his scientific one. But the emergency came too quickly. He never had the chance to show you what he'd discovered.
The funeral followed island custom, held at sunset on the cliffs overlooking the thermal works. The company men came first, their work clothes cleaned and pressed in honor of their fallen chief. Jenkins stood at the front, his massive frame somehow diminished by grief.
He saved us all.
Jenkins said quietly to Elena as she approached, carrying an urn filled with ash from the sealed volcanic vent, the very place where Marcus had made his sacrifice.
Down there at the end, when everything was going to hell. Pardon me, ma'am, he wouldn't let us send another soul down. Said he was the only one who could finish it.
He always put others first. Even when Kai was small, Marcus would work double shifts so other men could go home to their families.
Where is the boy? Shouldn't he be here for his father's send-off?
He's processing this in his own way, down at the water's edge. He needs to be alone right now.
Zara stood beside her mother, her young face set in the same determined lines as her father's had been. Thompson, barely older than her, approached hesitantly.
Ms. Zara, your father taught me everything I know about the deepwater equipment. He made me promise to look after the crew if anything ever happened to him.
Then he'd better keep that promise. Father wouldn't want his work to stop because he's gone. The thermal systems still need monitoring. The island still needs protecting.
She's got her father's steel in her, that one.
Jenkins smiled despite his grief. As the families gathered and the entire community whose lives Marcus had protected filled the clifftop, Elena scattered the volcanic ash from the sealed vent mixed with seawater, the marriage of earth and ocean that defined their island existence and the closest thing to Marcus's remains they would ever have. She spoke the traditional words, but her voice carried across the water toward where her son walked alone. Below on the beach, Kai combed the shoreline where the thermal currents had washed debris from the deep-water explosion. Most of it was twisted metal and scorched equipment, but among the wreckage he found something that made his blood run cold. Fragments of translucent flesh, still pulsing faintly with an inner light. Pieces of the Ancient One, torn apart by his father's final charge, but somehow still retaining a ghostly half-life. The largest fragment was part of a tentacle, thick as his arm and shot through with veins of volcanic fire. Kai knelt in the sand, studying the remains of the creature that had fought his father to the death. Even in destruction, the Ancient One commanded a terrible respect. This thing had been old when the island was young, had probably witnessed the first volcanic eruptions that formed their home.
You fought well, but my father fought better.
He whispered to the dying fragment. As if responding to his words, the tentacle piece pulsed once more, then crumbled to ash that the evening tide quickly claimed. Above him, he could hear the voices of the funeral gathering, but he remained on the beach, watching the waves carry away the last remnants of his father's final battle. Kai conducted his own ritual. In the workshop behind their cottage, he carefully mixed the volcanic ash from the sealed vent with the fragments of the ancient one he'd gathered from the beach. The translucent biomaterial still held traces of its ethereal glow, and when combined with the ash, it created something entirely new, a substance that seemed to pulse with both earthly and otherworldly power.
What are you doing?
Zara asked, appearing in the workshop doorway as Kai shaped the mixture with his hands.
Making something to remember him by. Something that honors what he was and what I need to become.
Zara studied the strange, glowing mixture, then looked at the strips of leather and brass fittings Kai had salvaged from their father's diving suit. Her mechanical mind immediately grasped the engineering challenge.
You'll need proper fastening points. The brass is still good. I can forge hooks and adjustment strips.
She fired up the small furnace used for household repairs.
But that mixture, it's like nothing I've seen. Are you sure it will hold its shape?
The heat from the volcanic ash should harden it, and the ancient one's remains, they seem to want to maintain their form.
As Zara worked the brass in the forge, heating and shaping the metal with practiced skill, Kai incorporated the traditional patterns his mother had taught him, geometric designs that honored both the sea and the volcanic forces beneath. The biomaterial from the ancient one responded strangely to his touch, almost as if it recognized the patterns.
Hand me those leather strips.
Zara said, wiping sweat from her brow. She created a series of brass hooks and adjustable clasps, designed to hold the mask securely but comfortably.
I'll need to rivet these properly to the mask itself.
Working together, they created something that was part memorial, part transformation. The mask itself, ash and primordial creature, fused by volcanic heat, formed the core. Zara's brass work provided the mechanical framework, while the leather strips from their father's diving suit completed the construction.
It's engineering and magic combined.
Zara said, studying their finished work. The mask seemed to breathe with inner light, the biomaterial creating veins of phosphorescence through the hardened volcanic ash.
Father would have said there's no such thing as magic, only forces we don't understand yet.
Kai replied, testing the fit. When the mask was complete, hardened by volcanic heat and sea salt, glowing faintly with the ancient one's dying essence, the family prepared for Kai's departure. The company crews were dismantling the emergency equipment, preparing to return to routine operations. The walk to the harbor felt like moving through a dream. Elena walked between her children, her hand resting lightly on Kai's arm. Zara carried her tool satchel, insisting on making final adjustments to the brass fittings if needed. Elena had said little since Kai had shown her the completed mask, but her silence felt understanding rather than disapproving.
This is who I've become,
Kai said, settling the mask over his face as they reached the wharf. Through the eye holes, the world appeared different, sharper, more interconnected. He could see the mechanical patterns his father had trusted, but also the subtle rhythms his mother had taught him to recognize.
Captain Moreau's expedition leaves from Port Santos next month. They're charting the deep thermal currents around the southern archipelago. She's agreed to take me on as a naturalist observer. This schooner will get me to Port Santos in time to join them.
The trading schooner will take you to Port Santos. From there, you'll wait for Captain Moreau's expedition and follow where it leads.
She paused, studying his face beneath the glowing mask.
Your father tried to control the forces around him, but you've learned to become part of them.
At the water's edge, she pressed a small wrapped bundle into his hands.
Sketching materials, and some of the bird drawings you made as a child. Sometimes it helps to remember where a flight began.
Her eyes glistened, but her voice remained steady.
I lost your father to the depths, but I'm not losing you. You're carrying both of us forward, his determination and my understanding that some journeys must be taken alone.
The deep currents require watching. Steam engines perceive what they're constructed to perceive. It takes different eyes to see what truly exists.
The trading schooner's captain, an old woman whose family had fished these waters for generations, nodded approvingly.
You're truly departing?
Zara asked as Kai loaded his few possessions onto the inter-island trading schooner.
Someone must observe the deep waters. The steam systems father engineered function perfectly, but they cannot perceive everything. Someone must read the signs.
He lifted the skull mask, feeling its weight. His father's determination merged with volcanic earth, sculpted by hands that understood both strength and delicacy.
Well now.
Came a familiar voice from behind them. Tomas had rowed up alongside the schooner, his weathered face creased with what might have been amusement.
First I see you in your grandfather's feathers, looking like some sea spirit. And now you've got yourself a proper death mask made of. What in blazes is that thing made of, lad?
Volcanic ash from where my father died, and parts of the creature he fought.
You made yourself a mask from the Ancient One itself? That's either the bravest thing I've ever heard, or the most foolish. Your grandfather's feather suit was one thing, that was just borrowing from the birds. But this...
No, but I know I need to try.
Honest answer. Your grandfather would have liked that. Just remember, the feathers taught you to move with the water. That mask, well...
He began rowing back toward shore. Behind them, Zara raised her hand in farewell, already turning back to her gauges and mechanical instruments. Ahead, the open ocean stretched endless and complex, its thermal layers and current patterns as intricate as any engineering diagram. A gannet circled the schooner, then dove cleanly into the blue water, emerging with a fish, the thermal layers restored, the natural order functioning again. But instead of flying away, it approached the vessel, its white wings catching the afternoon light. To the captain's amazement, the gannet landed directly on Kai's outstretched hand, its webbed feet gripping gently. The bird studied him with one dark eye, then shifted to his shoulder, settling there as if it belonged.
In 40 years at sea, I've never seen a wild gannet do such a thing.
You've been watching the changes too, haven't you? You know the patterns are shifting again.
Kai felt the bird's contentment through some connection he couldn't name. Perhaps the mask, perhaps his own deepening understanding, or simply the recognition between kindred spirits who read the water's moods. The gannet's presence was calm, purposeful, carrying the memory of thermal currents and fish movements, of winds that spoke of distant weather. The gannet tilted its head, and for a moment Kai sensed its approval, not of words, but of understanding. This boy wore the essence of the deep forces, carried the wisdom of those who listened rather than commanded. The bird could feel the Ancient One's presence in the mask, transformed from destroyer to guide. Kai smiled and withdrew his waterproof notebook with his free hand, careful not to disturb his feathered companion. There were new patterns to learn, new connections to discover. The sea was vast and perilous and full of signs that only careful eyes could read. His father had taught him about sacrifice and protection, his mother about listening to nature's subtle voice. He opened his waterproof notebook and began to sketch the gannet on his shoulder. Through the mask's eye holes, he saw details he'd never noticed before, the precise angle of each feather that channeled air beneath the bird's wings, the way its nostrils sealed against spray, the subtle communication in its posture that spoke of thermal currents and fish movements below.
Incredible. I can see why you move the way you do. Every part of you is designed for this.
His charcoal moved across the paper with newfound purpose, capturing not just the bird's appearance but the science of its design. Each line revealed another secret, how the gannet's streamlined body eliminated drag, how its hollow bones provided strength without weight, how its eyes could track movement beneath 3 feet of water. The gannet shifted on his shoulder, then took flight. As it departed, Kai felt a lingering sense of kinship. The bird would remember him, just as he would carry the memory of this moment when understanding had deepened beyond observation alone.
Safe travels, friend. Thank you for showing me.
Kai called softly as the gannet wheeled overhead.
Talking to birds now, are we?
The captain glanced over from the wheel.
They have more to say than most people realize.
He looked up from his sketch to see the volcanic peaks of his home island glowing orange against the darkening sky, their controlled fires growing smaller with each passing wave. Ahead, the deep ocean stretched endless and complex, where the marriage of earth and sea created patterns waiting to be discovered. In his pocket, carefully wrapped, lay one of the 2 gannet feathers his father had prepared but never given, a bridge between worlds that Marcus had tried to build, now carried forward by his son. The gannet circled once more, then flew ahead of the schooner, leading the way into the deepening blue. This has been Feathers and Ash, written by Philip Gray. Digital narration by Chatterbox TTS. Title song, When Birds Fall Silent, by Rose and Eden. Lyrics co-written by Philip Gray and Suno. Music composed and produced using Suno. Published by Pleased Reader. An imprint of Ostlage. Copyright 2025 by Philip Gray. Production copyright 2025 by Ostlage. All rights reserved.